Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about something weird, but I think it's more common than we think it is. So, today we're going to be talking about maladaptive daydreaming. Now, this is something that I've had personal experience with alongside any other child who has issues coping in life. Yeah, whatever. Anyways, maladaptive daydreaming is basically just you daydreaming in excess for usually hours or more at a time, completely living in your daydreams, usually, um, to cope with something external that you just can't deal with. Now, there are people in adulthood who do experience maladaptive daydreaming, but personally, from my experience, I had more of a situation from when I was a kid going up until my early adulthood. These days, it's much less bad just due to the fact that I don't have time to daydream. I don't have time to play games. I don't have time to just distract myself in my head. I need to do things. Now, when I was younger, and even a little bit younger, in Canada, I didn't have much of a life for myself. I really did lack the ability to socialize with my peers, to cope with my family and or my family life. There are just so many complexities that come to growing up, dealing with life, dealing with the plight that is. I had some issues as a teenager with myself. I didn't like myself. Like most teenagers, etc. Like, I just had a composition of things that I couldn't deal with. I didn't feel like I had any money, and I still don't feel like I have any money, blah, blah, blah. Gist of what I'm trying to say is when I was a kid, I would daydream all the time. And that's a normal kid thing in my personal opinion. When you're a child, you basically are just there to kind of like daydream and make play, make fun because you're pretty much infantile, really. You're a youngling. You have like no worries about the world and or no grasp of things like physics and whatnot, or the limitations of the world. So you tend to be more open with imposing those kinds of beliefs, those more creative beliefs on yourself. It makes for great art, makes for great ideas, makes for really cool concepts. But at the end of the day, it's just you can't uphold reality as a child, in my opinion. Most children don't have a good grasp of reality. Their brain development is just not there yet, and yada yada yada. You get what I'm saying. Now, my childhood was a bit weird. Like, I did lack a bit of input from my parents, and I did live mostly on the internet from the age of 5. Like, that I remember being a big component to my life. It was just the internet. It was video games, the internet, drawing, cooking, and like I'd socialize a bit, but definitely and I was willing to socialize, but the point I'm trying to make is I was just more in my own world, very common for children. Now, when I hit the ages of like 7 to 12, I don't know if this is important to mention, but it's just something that's crossed my mind. I consistently had really bad nightmares, night terrors of being horribly mutilated and brutalized, and I could feel like everything in the dreams. I would then wake up, and then I would still be like grabbing onto parts of my body that still like I thought were actually attacked. I think that when you're asleep, you have a much higher likelihood for being like way more in your head, of course. And maybe, some creative people or, certain instances can perpetuate you to have certain interactions in your mind that are beyond the scope of realism. Now, obviously, I've never died before, and I've never, been horribly mutilated before. But in my dreams, I would. I would be horribly mutilated, die, get murdered, have to kill somebody, have to kill myself, etc. And the result would always be that I would feel myself leaving my body at the end of it, and then I would wake up. And I now realize, being older and having time to reflect on these things, I suspect that the leaving my body part was me waking up anyways, and it was just more of a fuel to my cognitive fire, if you get what I'm saying. In general, though, had these horrible dreams, and obviously, like, my brain has no conceptualization of what this pain actually entails, but it would just be extremely painful. So I just don't know if, like, I don't think it would be accurate, obviously, real life versus my dreams, whatever. But point I'm trying to make is I had very realistic dreams growing up. And I also had very realistic daydreams growing up. When I wasn't in school, and I skipped a lot of school growing up, I'd usually lie in bed, blast music, and that was my escape. I'd imagine myself in a different world, doing different things. I used to imagine anime characters doing certain things. Whatever the case may be, like, like completely new freaking side quests of Naruto, or, a dungeon crawl or something. Or whatever the case may be, like, I would just come up with ideas like most children, but I would literally daydream for hours. For hours upon hours. I'm talking like 9, 10, 11 hours. I would just be in my own world, and it was awesome. It was everything I could have imagined. I didn't have a real world to go to, so why would I ever want to leave the world that I made for myself? I could make whatever friends I wanted. I could make whatever, experiences I wanted. And the funny thing is, you would think that, like, maybe it's just all in your head, but when you get really into the world of daydreaming, you get really into it. I would be more on the side of, like, insane, like, jumping off cliffs, flying off buildings, blowing things up, like, just typical kid stuff, right? Because at this point, we're a child. Now, the one cool thing. Oh, I would every now and then have a little romance spiel, like a little thing where it's, like, the idea of having a boyfriend or getting married or something, just something to run through, but I'd usually always stick to the typical explosions, grand battles, fighting, things like that. Superpowers, big one was superpowers. I've always wanted superpowers, like most people. Now, the thing about this, though, was it started getting pretty intense after a certain point in time. Like, I'd be feeling like, when I'm doing all this stuff, I'd be having a heart attack because my adrenaline would actually be pumping, so my heart would beat faster. Or I'd sweat. And the other thing is rhyming in my head. Now, I still do this to this day because it's just part of my cognition. It's been hardwired into my mind ever since I was like 6 or 7 to be rhyming to things. And my rhymes have progressively gotten more complex, I think, over the years just due to the expansion of my vocabulary. But in general, I've always been one to rhyme. So I could never remember the lyrics to songs, and I still don't remember the lyrics to most songs because I don't think about them. I don't think about what the lyrics of the song are. I usually just listen to the beat, the voice, etc., and then I play like my own rhymes over top of it. Not the best composition of cognition, I must full-heartedly admit, but it's just interesting, and I suspect that's going to be with me forever because I literally, outside smoking a cigarette, start rhyming in my head while I listen to music. Have some coffee in the morning, start rhyming in my head. It's literally just what my brain does, and I don't know. It's just a thing that's always been with me, and it still hasn't left, in spite of my maladaptive daydreaming going down ever since. Now, I'm generalizing, by the way. I do not have any formal diagnoses of maladaptive daydreaming or anything like that. I've had suggestions, but I've never been assessed for those kinds of things appropriately, so it doesn't matter. I'm just generalizing, but at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you probably know you have it if you're constantly escaping the real world and falling into a different one composed of your own delusion. It's almost like schizophrenia in a sense, but definitely not schizophrenia because that actually entails like, the world, like your reality and your subconscious or your delusions, they all mix together. With maladaptive daydreaming, you can tell most of the time, I think, that you're in a daydream. You just can't tell when to stop and or when you are or aren't daydreaming. Like, you'll just automatically start doing it after a while, like any mental habit, and then you'll be like, oh, I was daydreaming for 4 hours. Interesting. You can do it in school. School's stupid anyways, honestly. Like, most of the time with school, when I was in high school at least, I'd be able to get away with daydreaming all day long. And I'd still pass my classes because they were easy classes, And, like, I know I'm being weird because I'm reflecting on the past so much, but I do have all this extra time now, this empty space in my head by not daydreaming to think about the fact that I was daydreaming for so long. To cope with something in my existence, there are many variables, but at the end of the day, it was just a very interesting experience. And it's made my brain sync up more with the creative sides of things. It's great for story building. Amazing for story building. I mean, like, I've literally created entire worlds just for me. That don't have to be just for me. They can be for anyone if I made a book out of it. And I think that this is where some of the most creative minds can come from when it comes to daydreaming. Not maladaptively. Just daydreaming in general. I know I'm generalizing throughout the majority of this video. But daydreaming in general, I think, is actually a very healthy tactic to escape something in your life. It's better than most things like, substance to abuse or yourself to abuse or to, be just hateful and miserable all the time. To escape into a daydream, into a world where there's less shame, less hardship than what you otherwise would feel, or it's just to let yourself kind of just live your non-life for just a short period of time. Completely understandable, pretty healthy. And it levels your mind. It makes you think about things you want for the future, Unless it's superpowers. I don't think you're going to get those. But, like, in general, some people just daydream about living a good, normal life, having the white picket fence and a family. It gives you good perspective. It does. But there is a threshold where it becomes toxic. It just becomes something that eats your entire mind, your cognition. So you really need to look in on yourself on what you're doing with your time. Because when I was really in the depths of my daydreaming, procrastination was my number one outcome from such. I would procrastinate excessively. It would take me days to do things because I wasn't there. I was just in my head. Now, this was when I was much younger. Nowadays, I literally tell myself, before we can do anything, we have to do these things. Do I daydream still? Yes, definitely. There's no way I don't. But I find that there are just other things I need to get done, and I don't have time to daydream all the time. I have to think. And daydreaming is thinking, but I also have to think about my, current circumstance or work in the moment or do whatever I need to do. So I think that if you feel like you have an issue with maladaptive daydreaming, one, I don't know, man. I don't know if you should get a diagnosis or not, because at the end of the day, I don't know how diagnosable something like this really is. It's kind of like daydreaming is not something that can be measured. It's just based on the distraction and procrastination of the human mind. So I don't know if there's a way you can diagnose it, but I'm sure you possibly can. Or, in general, just try and, at least for a short period of time, stay in the moment for what you're doing when you're performing a task in the real world, not in your daydreams. Try to spend some time performing and being conscious and there in the task. If you go off the rails and start daydreaming again, snap back, get back to it, start focusing on reality. That's just usually how I've found myself to have broken out of it when I'm daydreaming too much. But the other thing is, why are you daydreaming? Because I'm pretty sure that a lot of us do it to cope with something in our life that we need to fix. Daydreaming is like any other coping mechanism. Some people sleep to cope. Some people, utilize substances to cope. Some people go to therapy to cope or to think about their certain circumstances so that they can cope in the future. Some people, do crazy things like lose their minds. And other people, they start daydreaming in excess. There's way more, obviously, but the point I'm trying to make is if you feel like you're daydreaming too much, there is a point of redemption for you. You don't always have to be in your head, but the question is, why are you in your head? You have to ask yourself that. Most of the time, the times where, at least when I look in on myself, the worst times of my life were the times I daydreamed the most, because I daydreamed the most when things were really bad for me. And nowadays, things are a little bit more level and chill, but even if they're not, I don't have time to daydream all the time. I can't, etc. And, it's kind of sad because there are a lot of cool things I did when I daydreamed that I just can't do anymore. And, I'm not trying to be weird and disappointing and stuff, because I still daydream a lot. I do. I'll listen to music and I'll be daydreaming, or I'll come up with a cool concept and then I'll make it into a book or, a story or something like that. But, when I was in school, when I was a kid, I would imagine myself, flying off of a dragon or something, and, all of my friends would have superpowers, and I would have superpowers, and we'd all be, blowing up things and flying around and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'd have pretty cool superpower concepts. I'm getting spam calls from somebody who's trying to steal my information. Every 10 seconds, someone's trying to steal your information. Anyways, that's the point of the video. It's just interesting. Tell me, have you had an excessive daydreaming throughout your life? And also, have you found that you've, over time, progressed out of that or regressed or gotten deeper into it? It's a very interesting concept to me, and I have to say, I don't know how much logic can be applied to a subject like this, but sharing personal experiences, I think, helps perpetuate the mind's eye, whatever, just the considerations for your future. In general, it helps you get perspective on things that you might otherwise not think about, or things you did in the past that you might otherwise not understand. Or things, you coped with without knowing you needed to cope. Because I still don't know what I was coping with. I look back on things that I needed to cope from or cope with when I was a kid, and there was either, from what I suspect, an excessive such, so much so that I was just overwhelmed in the moment. Maybe that's why I regressed into my mind. Or there were certain things I just could not fix. So those things perpetuated me to daydream more as a form of escapism, really. It's all about escapism. You just want to escape the problem. If you can't escape the problem, eventually that problem will consume you or never leave you. At some point you either need to escape or solve. And I've done both in many regards, like many people have. It's just what we do as humans. But in general, there is a threshold where if you cannot solve nor escape, you may just find yourself in your own mind, either slowly losing it from the insanity that is the circumstance, or just to cope with it, you might regress into your cognition. So that's what I personally think. But tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you think maladaptive daydreaming is a thing? Do you think it's fake? Do you think everybody does it? Do you think daydreaming is just daydreaming? And sure, some people can daydream in excess, but is it really maladaptive? Is it fixable? Is it measurable? Is it concrete? Is it just a system of thought? Is it a coping mechanism? And if you find yourself daydreaming in a state of excess or having done so, do tell me maybe why you suspect you did, your logical justification for such, and or do you still do it now? When do you do it? Do you do it all the time, etc.? I'm just very interested. I think it's a little bit of a cognitive phenomenon, or at least a way of categorizing something that I think everybody in some capacity does, and then some of us do it in excess. So tell me what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, my friends. I hope you all enjoyed, and yeah, Slater.